From one of the biggest viral videos to a historic magazine cover, the No Straws movement and the campaign that broke ballet. We're going to take a look back at our most memorable stories from the year that was.
Are topical, and it's also Childish Gambino has become the new Kanye West for a lot of people. Kanye West used to be that conscious voice in hip-hop that a lot of people liked, but he was also just a modern and different kind of black artist that we looked up to until recently.
So what voice then is Childish Gambino articulating, and who is it aimed at?
I think it's aimed at the general population, to be quite honest. I think he's an artist, and I think the responsibility of any artist is to reflect the times that they are living in. And I think that's what he was successful at doing with both the song and the video. I mean, when we get to the nuances, I'll talk a bit about what those nuances are and how they relate to even how we consume culture today.
All right, let's wade into that then. The first thing is the gunning down of the choir has direct impact on a terrible event that happened in Charleston, North Carolina.
So with that, I think it's just about framing how black lives are really just not as valued as some of the things that some of the people in the US specifically want, like the right to own guns. So when you see in the video, after shooting the people, because the choir is not the first people that he shoots at, he first shoots at a guitarist right at the beginning of the video.
And then he does something with the gun. What does he do?
So a child walks up to him with a cloth, takes the gun, wraps it, and takes it away. So that,
and there's a degree of reverence in that.
100%. Yeah. For me, it's like the handling of the gun is so much more cautious than the handling of these lives.
And what does that then say about America's relationship with firearms?
I think, I mean, everyone discusses this all the time. It's a very weird thing because, you know, we know that guns kill people, but here we are. America has a president who is pro-guns, and I mean a lot of his base, of course, that he has to satisfy supports that. And when things like Black Lives Matter and all the debates that come with that, and people arguing all lives matter, that's not the debate here. The debate is about how black lives seem to not be as important and as issues like owning a gun, for example.
It's also an indictment, and you can tease this out for me, about the distraction of social media. So on the one hand, there is horror, there is mayhem, there's mourning that is happening. On the other hand, at the flick of a button, we're celebrating something.
100%.
What does that say about social media and the impact that it's having on lives?
I'm not sure what the word limit is these days on Twitter, but it used to be 140 characters. And I've always said, you know, people have the concentration span of 140 characters because you find yourself sitting on Twitter, the trending topic is Mama Weenie's funeral and we are mourning. And then the next minute you're excited about the Kwara Kwara dance. And I think Childish Gambino shows that in the video after gunning down the first person and starts dancing the Kwara Kwara, and there's a lot of chaos happening around him, but there seems to be this joyfulness that's happening with him and the group of dancers. It's totally about the distraction.
About the distraction, and we're always looking for the next big thing.
We're always looking for the next big thing. It doesn't matter how serious the issues we are looking at are. Our concentration seems to just shift from one thing to another.
Well, Joanna...
Amid political shake-ups and as South Africans celebrated Freedom Day on the 27th of April in 2018, a new movement tapping into the social DNA of the country was launched. Set to the sounds of the famous Eddie Grant song, which was banned by the apartheid government during the turbulent 1980s, the Hope Joanna movement aimed to speak to a renewed sense of hope and optimism shared by the people of this country.
I think the purpose as a collective consciousness, as a country, we have always relied on current events to kind of tell us what's happening and our temperature of what the mood is. But it's important when we kind of reflect back to understand the adversity and the triumphs that this country's been through. And lots of the times people make very immediate decisions based on certain things they see. They don't realize the resolve they've been through. So I think this is just a reminder to go to people, each time you make a decision, kind of think about where we've come from.
So it's a little bit of context, in other words.
Completely.
Yeah. And there's also a sense, the question, of course, is how long it's going to last for, but we don't need to talk about that, about a new euphoria that is sweeping the country. And in many ways, people have a responsibility now to work on that and to capitalize on that, even people in the advertising industry.
Absolutely. I think, the messages we put out there every day kind of affect our subconscious. And the idea is, for advertisers, it's important that the aspect of what positivity, what our resolve is, what we are as a kind of the resilience as a nation needs to come through. I think what is our South Africanness needs to come through. I think that's an important thing, yeah.
All right, so Clinton, that's the background, the context to the campaign. What did you do?
We set out to create a piece that was grounded in that old track, and we sought to reorchestrate that track.
What's the allure of that old track? Everyone knows it, particularly those of us around in the 80s.
Yeah,
but anyway,
we do. I think it's a very loved track. I think today, funny enough, it was more appropriate than it possibly was even in those days.
I think you might be right.
And I think the opportunity was to give some local artists and people that were involved in the movement the chance to reorchestrate it and to bring it to a younger audience, I think not necessarily who will have been exposed to it when it was originally launched. And I think that gives the campaign another opportunity to live in a different broadcast media, which is, in sound itself and on radio.
There's no brand attached to this.
I think that's the purpose of this year.
It would have been easier to do it with a brand.
I think if you put a brand to it, you'll be selling something. And,
But you are selling something. You're selling hope, aren't you?
That is such an intangible, beautiful thing. And I think, to commercialize hope, it would definitely be a travesty. But the idea, again...
You're just an old idealist. That's what you are.
I am an idealist with a realistic view.
So, did you think about going a brand route? I think you could have locked this in with so many different brands.
We did think of going a brand route, and there were lots of partners involved in the background. In fact, there are still people now wanting to add their name to it. But I think if you add your name to it, we want you to add it where we can see the campaign grow, rather than just putting your logo at the end.
In 2018, the Johannesburg Ballet combined forces with the TBWA Hunt Lascaris agency, all in a bid to connect with younger audiences and to eradicate the elitist stereotype that surrounds the art form. The campaign saw a number of short videos depicting topical issues through dance. The campaign was awarded a gold in the digital and interactive social media category at the 2018 Lurie Awards. I suppose it's fair to say that it has an elitist tag, but my sense is that isn't it gaining a lot more popularity among this group that we refer to as millennials?
That's quite correct, Jeremy. I think that, as myself as a young black man, and, I came from an environment where sport itself was the most accessible thing to someone like me. But then I went to school and discovered that there's an art form where people are taught how to dance. And transformed that a couple of years later, here I am sitting, being part of one of the best ballet companies in the world, and where I've seen a lot of changes happening throughout the years, because we know that there is a hunger for this ballet. People are passionate about it, but they don't have access to it.
Can you define what the new audience is, given that some, and I think within your own company, have alluded to it as a white Eurocentric art form, which in many ways it probably is?
True. I think with programs such as the Joburg Ballet School, we've got development programs in Soweto, Alexandra, and in Braamfontein, where we find these young, African children who are hungry for this art form, and therefore we also not only turn them into dancers, but also audiences. And therefore even mom and dad and grandpa and grandma become so interested in going to the theatre. And so these are young, very hip and happening young individuals who'd rather spend more time on their gadgets rather than go to a theatre show. But now we're trying to change that by creating these breaking ballet videos, because they're accessible on their gadgets wherever they may be.
At which point you called Cabello into the whole mix. You've never danced a ballet step in your life, I can see that. But beside that, though, so essentially I'm probably being a little disingenuous here when I'm trying to say you're turning ballet into a brand. But work with my thinking if you can. What you needed to do was to take this brand of ballet and make it more accessible to this audience that we've referred to. What was the thinking behind that? And is it difficult to reach that gadget-driven millennial audience that Kek is talking about?
To actually resonate with them, we have to actually touch on topics that are actually culturally relevant. So we have a process called D-Live.
Don't go so fast. Why is that important to do that?
That is very important because they're actually time-starved, and they only take notice of current affairs and keeping abreast of things, and we have to actually disseminate the actual content as well in bite-sized chunks. So that's why we came up with Breaking Ballet, which is today's big stories told as bite-sized ballets, because in the art form of ballet, it is storytelling, and we took that storytelling to another level. We actually then have almost like a social commentary, but also an interpretation of current events in the form of dance.
So what type of current events are we talking about?
We have varying topics. The current ballet actually showcases the Black Panther movie, which was actually a cultural moment.
Yeah.
We have other varying ones like the Cape Town crisis, which is the drought.
The water crisis.
The water crisis. So there was another dance that we actually put together that talks to that. And then on a humorous take, we actually have in January, January, which is the social conversation that happens.
Yeah.
And I think that's another key point, which is tapping into these conversations that are happening online and resonating with the audience that way.
Next, we'll look at the growing No Straws movement and a historic magazine cover that caused quite a stir in 2018.